Hello everyone, this is Carson, and welcome to the first devlog for my mobile game, Ultimate Battle Arena. Throughout the development of the game, I will be using these videos to document my progress and share all the difficulties and triumphs that I encountered on the journey. This is more of an introduction episode. I actually started working on this game about 3 years ago, and I wanted to share all the stages it has gone through up until this point. I will also use this video to share my vision for the game and what my goals are moving forward. Since the day I started game development, I've always wanted to make a mobile game. The first video games I ever played were on my mom's phone: Dragonvale, SimCity, Waterslide Extreme, Temple Run. Ah, the good old days. When I got older and got an Xbox, my favorite games were still on my phone.
Mobile gamers aren't real gamers.
I played Clash of Clans throughout elementary school and Clash Royale throughout middle school. These games solidified my love for mobile games, multiplayer ones especially. There was only one problem. I didn't know what mobile game I was going to make. I eventually narrowed the options down to an online PvP because of the replayability and word-of-mouth exposure that comes with multiplayer games. After racking my brain for months, I came upon the obvious solution: a shooter game. So original, I know. The thing is, I realized that despite the popularity of the genre, there was no multiplayer shooter game that was made specifically for mobile and done well.
NANI?!
Sure, there's plenty of first-person shooters on the App Store, but they always feel clunky, the controls clutter the screen, and they lack originality. The complex controls make the game inaccessible for a lot of casual players, which is a big part of the mobile game audience. The problem is they feel like they are just mobile versions of PC or console games, which usually they are. There really is no reason to play the clunky mobile versions of these games instead of the real console or PC games. Yeah, Brawl Stars exists, but I didn't know about that game when I had the idea for mine. I was actually thinking about quitting work on my game when it was released, but I think there's big differences between what I have planned for Ultimate Battle Arena and what Supercell did with Brawl Stars, and I think there's lots of room for improvement. The vision for Ultimate Battle Arena really started to take shape as I thought about how to address all the problems I have with other mobile shooters. What I decided to make was a casual, chaotic, online multiplayer top-down twin-stick shooter game that was made specifically with mobile in mind. I also wanted it to be 2D because it just seemed easier at the time. Making the game top-down makes it more simple and mobile-friendly, but also introduces a whole set of new challenges. Top-down shooters tend to be boring. Without 3 dimensions, the fun movement, satisfying headshots, and strategic positioning that people love about shooter games is pretty much out the window. I think the movement problem can be addressed. Same with strategy, and as far as the headshots thing, I'm definitely not hitting satisfying headshots when I'm spraying down bots in COD Mobile, and I still have fun. I think there's just something about aiming in 3D that makes FPS games more engaging, but also a big part is how impactful and fun the weapons are to use. With all this in mind, here are some requirements I have for the game. Stylistic appealing graphics, simple controls, satisfying weapons, exciting movement, and strategy. Do I know how I'm going to achieve these things? Well, let's just say it's a work in progress. I'll be trying to work towards these goals as I go. Here's some more details about the game that I won't mention later on. There will be lots of game modes, but Team Deathmatch will be the main focus. A main part of the game will be class creation. There's going to be a lot of weapons to choose from, different types of grenades, perks, and there will be lots of characters that have their own ability/ultimate. You will be able to switch between 2 weapons during the match. I'm hoping that synergies between different weapons and abilities will add a lot of strategy to the game. So, with a clear idea of the game in my head, I started a new Unity project and began work. I was in 8th grade at the time.
And
Ultimate
also,
Battle Arena, early footage.
Wait, I'm not ready yet.
Never before seen.
That's all I have, though. It's like bare minimum.
What you're watching now is gameplay from my first prototype. Appealing graphics? Check. Just kidding. Graphics were obviously not a priority at this point. I did, however, have the main networking systems in place, which was a big deal because I had never made a multiplayer game before. I was using Photon, which meant I could use their servers and integrate it with Unity easily. The only problem was Photon uses a peer-to-peer networking system, meaning every client sends their position and actions to all the other clients. This makes it really easy for one client to cheat and send fake data to the other players. I really wanted to have an authoritative model, where all the clients send their inputs to a server and then the server sends positions back to all the clients. That way, a cheater can only fake their inputs and not important game data. Anyway, I came up with some workaround where I made one player the master client, acting like the authoritative server. To prevent the master client from cheating, all the other clients would receive each player's inputs and vote on whether they agreed with the master client. If they disagreed, a different player would become the master client. My head almost exploded trying to understand lag compensation, client-side prediction, interpolation, etc. But amazingly, I got everything working. It was a ridiculously overcomplicated solution that probably wouldn't have worked in the real world. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. I'll go into much more detail in a future video when I talk about the networking system I'm using currently. As far as actual gameplay goes, I had implemented a lot of the most important features. There's a bit of a problem with the twin-stick shooter on mobile, because you can't aim and shoot separately. In my game, automatic weapons will shoot automatically when you start aiming, and semi-automatic weapons like snipers and shotguns will fire when you release the aiming joystick. Another important decision I made early on is to not have a fog of war effect. This is something a lot of top-down shooters add. It basically hides enemy players if they aren't in your character's line of sight, mimicking the experience of hiding around corners in an FPS. I decided not to add it because I feel like it makes for an unintuitive and frustrating experience. You will also notice that the player can dash and throw grenades. These will be some of the most important features in the game. The dashing will eventually be a dive roll, and that will help make movement more interesting. I'm envisioning dashing into cover, or dashing toward an enemy to shotgun them in the face. Stuff like that. The grenades are meant to force enemies out from cover and prevent situations where both players are sitting behind obstacles, like doing this. This is one problem with not having a fog of war effect, because you can always see exactly where the enemies are, and when exactly they'll leave cover. I've always wanted to have buildings in the game, so I finished an early version of that system as well. Buildings will provide a place to camp or shoot at enemies without them being able to see you. I also made it so grenades blow holes in the roof of buildings, allowing players to see in that way. After I built the game at this stage and tested the multiplayer on my phone with a few friends, I was ready to move on to the next stage. The next thing I tackled was creating a map to test the game. I spent a lot of time on visuals here. I wanted to try and create a coherent, cartoony, and stylized art style as opposed to realism. More fun, cartoony graphics appeal to a wider audience, and they're also easier to create. It's much easier to make bad-looking realistic art because everyone knows what it's supposed to look like. Unfortunately, I am no artist. I discovered that real quick. To achieve a stylized art style, I ended up just drawing the silhouette of a shape, adding a bit of cell shading if you want to call it that, slapping a thick black outline on it, and calling it a day. I remember I was trying to go for a flat, cartoony art style that was also gritty and military looking. I pretty much embraced the mouse-drawn look, and it wasn't too bad.
Are you sure about that?
As far as map design goes, it was basically just a circle. I tried to make it so there were defined lanes leading to the center with a bit of crossover points, but it ended up just being a jumble of rocks. It actually worked fine for a free-for-all map. This took a long time, most of which was spent trying to figure out what the desert buildings look like. Finally, I was ready to move on to the next, way harder than expected project. I wanted to make bots so that I could test the game easier. Not to mention I wanted to have bots in case there weren't any players online when I released the game. You know, if that ever happens. Unity's built-in pathfinding system doesn't work with 2D games, so naturally, I decided to make my own. Haha, boy was this fun! Before I knew it, I was headfirst into white papers, learning about computational geometry, reflex and convex angles, Rammer, Douglas, Payuker, line simplification, triangulation, shape unification and inflation, something about funnels and A's and stars. But at last, after 2 months, I had done it. I'm actually pretty proud of this program. It uses the points of colliders in the scene to create a navigation mesh, which dynamically updates and is saved in an XML file. It's a little buggy and slow, but it works most of the time. I'm actually glad I decided to do this myself because it introduced me to more algorithmic programming as opposed to only game development. Anyway, now I can move on to actual gameplay. Wait, no, not yet. It was time to work on the UI. I really struggled with this because I felt like I had to put a black outline on everything to keep things consistent. Disgusting! By this point, I realized the game's graphics were not good enough, and my game had a bit of an identity crisis. I decided to switch to pixel art, the perfect art style for bad artists. But I wasn't only second-guessing the art style. I was getting a little concerned that my game didn't have a story or setting. Part of the reason I was struggling with the UI is I didn't know how to style it. My theme of gritty toon military could only take me so far. So I also decided to make the game futuristic and set in space.
Stop it. Get some help.
I had a vision of dark pixel art maps with lots of cool glowing lights. This meant I could make all the characters, weapons, and abilities futuristic, and I can make the UI pixel artified and future themed as well. I was also watching a lot of videos about level design, and I wanted to make the maps and game modes more Counter-Strike-like, so that the game required more strategy and team play.
I'm afraid not.
Nice! Where's my team at?
Holy Jesus.
So I got to work designing another map, this time set in space. Here's my drawing of it. It's supposed to be 2 spaceships crashing into each other, so both teams spawn in a different ship and then they cross through space and into the other ship to light a bomb on the other side or something. Unfortunately, I realized pixel art is a lot harder than it looks, especially on such a large scale. This is my attempt at this piece. It's not that bad, but it also isn't what I had in mind, and took forever. I figured this map was way too big for my game, and would take too long to draw out, and had too many complex shapes that I wouldn't be able to do the pixel art for anyway. So yet again, I designed another map, still with the futuristic space theme, but smaller. This one was too small, so I made
Another one.
I liked this one, and I started thinking about designing levels where each one had a special feature. For example, I was going to make this center part here a big spinning platform thing, and other ones with big lasers or zero gravity or something. I was still planning on making the game modes more attack and defend types, and the story was going to be like a space war, and each faction was trying to evade the other faction's ships, reach their core, and destroy it. Predictably, I had issues. I wasn't able to make good pixel art, I couldn't figure out how to make the 2D lighting system that was so integral to the art style I had in mind, and I was questioning my decision to move away from the casual, chaotic gameplay I originally wanted and towards more hardcore strategic gameplay, which probably wouldn't even work out because most players would be riding the subway, playing a mobile game online with random people who would not be communicating with their teammates in a way so that it makes sense that I would have a strategic, intense, team-based Counter-Strike game in the first place. I also felt like making the game so focused on the futuristic theme would alienate a lot of casual players that maybe aren't into that. whereas everyone knows that everyone is into cartoon styles. So I decided to go back to the toon art style without a setting and back to chaotic, casual gameplay and modes. Wow, wasn't that a roller coaster? As I'm re-examining my old graphics, I remember another issue I had. I wanted to make the game feel sunny and hot like a desert, but I felt like the game needed shadows to convey that. And on things like building roofs, I just arbitrarily placed the shadows to try and make it feel 3D, but I felt like they were missing something. Was I going to manually draw shadows for all my sprites? That didn't seem like a good option. After much hard thinking, I had the solution. I would just make all my assets 3D. That way, I could have dynamic shadows and consistent shading automatically applied. I jumped straight into Blender and started modeling a player character, and this is what I came up with. Yeah, alright, I quit.
$2,000 years later.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
So actually, I didn't quit working on the game just because my first attempt at modeling a character looked so bad, although that did kill my motivation. I just got caught up in a lot of projects that seemed more exciting at the time, and these projects took way longer than I thought. I've always planned on coming back to the game, and here I am. I'm older now, I've actually taken a programming class, now I'm ready to continue work on this game and finally finish it. Let's texture this man, shall we? Oh god, not again. So I've decided that less is more, and I'm going to make all my assets as minimal as possible. If there's nothing there, there's nothing to criticize, am I right? The character may be a little creepy without a face.
Rescue us! We're trapped!
And I might add one later, but for now it will only be seen from above anyway. I do have one concern about the minimalist art style. The characters are going to be a big part of the game, and it's going to be hard to give them a personality and make them look distinctive when they don't even have a face. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Alright, now it's time for my secret weapon, toon shading. Ta-da! Now we're getting somewhere. The toon shading also does a great job hiding my bad modeling skills. Just look at this rock. With toon shading, basically everything disappears, and now it's cool. I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. Linear colors, whatever that means, skybox lighting, and post-processing, which somehow I've never heard about before. Finally, we've got something that is looking decent. So I've just set up this scene kind of as proof to myself that I can make the graphics look good enough to release, since the visuals were always the bottleneck for me. And I think this is a start. What you see here is all the gameplay I've gotten done. I'm basically back at square one, not that I had much gameplay implemented previously. I'm obviously going to try and reuse as much as I can from the old version of the game, but I want to redo a lot and it takes a pretty big rework to make everything function in 3D anyway. I'm also redoing the networking. I'll talk about that in another video. Now I'm aware that right now most of the goals I talked about previously are not satisfied. That's why this is Devlog number 0. There are many more to come, and I'll be making improvements as I test things and add features. Everything is still in the very early stages. The plan is definitely to release the game for iOS and Android, but I've never released a game, so follow these videos to see how far I get. I would love it if you left your thoughts and ideas in the comments. I'll definitely be reading and responding to them. Sorry this was such a dense video, I hope I didn't bore you with too much backstory. I just felt like this video was necessary to give context for future devlogs. I've got big plans for this channel. In addition to devlogs, I'm going to be posting a lot of other content. That's right, game development, programming, machine learning, robotics. My face, it's all coming to a screen near you. Your screen. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I'm a